Story 1. So I mid-20s M and my roommate housemate 1825 M, who we'll call X, have been living together for a few months now. We didn't know each other at all before moving in. The leasing office chooses who lives with who in their apartments with more than one bedroom, think college dorms. Anyways, he was a somewhat decent roommate housemate, up until one night where he had a huge fight with his GF 1825F, I'm guessing, who we'll call Y, but more on that later. I'm a non-smoker. The apartment does not permit smoking in the building, and I have a history of breathing problems that can be aggravated by smoking or secondhand smoke. I've mentioned this to my roommate, but he keeps smoking in the apartment. I've been able to cope with this situation thus far without any major issues, but after a ton of hard work, my waivers for enlistment in the Army finally got approved. I am ecstatic, but when I go to training, I'll be tested for all sorts of drugs I don't use. This includes weed, which is what X has been smoking. He wasn't smoking enough to cause much concern until recently, though. After I got the news about my enlistment, I mentioned to X I was getting tested for weed soon. He then began smoking in the apartment at least once daily. Then I remembered back to the fight he had with his GF. I don't really know the particulars of the fight because I had to get up early for work the next day, but based solely on the parts I did hear that night, it could have arguably passed as spicy bedtime activities, especially to someone exhausted from work and who just wants to stay at least half asleep so they can wake up on time the next day. The only reason I really know for sure there was an issue is because when I got home from work the next day, I saw X had an eviction notice posted right there on the front door of the apartment. He was scheduled to move out a few weeks ago, but when I saw it, I didn't concern myself with it because his smoking wasn't too bad before the notice went up, and both his relationship with Y and his lease have absolutely nothing to do with me. So, after asking him to stop smoking in the apartment a few days ago, and his continued persistence in doing so, I decided enough was enough and went over to the leasing office and asked them what happened with that eviction. Turns out he was supposed to be gone and was now trying to squat. His key was deactivated, so he stockpiled food and hardly ever leaves his bedroom. He must have made up with his GF, who seems to be giving him food and enabling his behavior. He's also completely stopped picking up after himself and has caused some water damage to both the bathroom and the kitchen since moving in. I'll try locking him out if I get the chance, and if he persists after that, I can let the police handle the situation. Story 2. That was until a few days ago. I had a conversation with my mother about this camping we went to around 3-4 years ago, when I was around 9-10 years old. When we talked about it, we came on the topic of this crazy lady who was one of the camping owners who blamed me for breaking property. What I'm about to tell you is the full story. So, around 3 years ago, we went to this camping in France. My mom and dad are people who love to introduce their children to other cultures, languages and foods. I'm from the Netherlands, BTW, so it was ideal for them to take us to France because they thought it was a beautiful place, which, let's be honest, it is. When we arrived, however, we were taken by surprise when we saw this camping was the property of, you guessed it, Dutchies. For some reason my parents didn't know this, but the guests did. So many of them were Dutch, with just one Frenchman. My parents were disappointed, but me and my 2 brothers weren't. This meant making friends and forming bonds would be much easier, because we wouldn't have a language barrier. As soon as we parked on a spot, my brothers and I got to playing. There was a little sandbox in the middle of the field, so my brother and I sprinted towards it. I got a bit too excited, so I threw some toys in the air. As soon as I did that, some random woman whom I later got to know was one of the owners of the camping spawned out of nowhere and started screaming at me. RW random woman, what are you doing with that toy? You can't throw that? And all these other toys. Have you broken those too? You. Me. No, ma'am, I didn't. Sorry for throwing the toy, I will not. RW, no, I've had enough of this. You and your friends are always destroying the sandbox. I'll talk to your parents. Me, but I just came here 15 minutes ago. But she was already gone. I was left in shock and began crying a bit. Why was this goblin of a woman accusing me? I ran to Mom and Dad and told them what happened. My mom was furious. When the woman came, she put on her nice face and explained she was one of the owners of the camping. How your son has been destroying property, and that if he doesn't stop this, you'll be sent off the terrain. My mom wasn't having any of it. Listen, my mom is one of the most light-hearted women you'll ever meet. So when she's angry, you know you've messed up. And when she's angry, she can be an absolute witch. So she started going off on this woman. She told her everything I wanted to say, and more. How we just came there, that I didn't break anything, ever, that I would never do anything like that in the first place, and that she found this really offensive. The woman shut her mouth and listened, and then said sorry around 20 times before she left. So, that's the end of it. Right? Wrong. This woman, after the encounter, whenever she saw me around, gave me a death glare. I would smile at her. I loved that she still really thought I was guilty, although I couldn't fully confirm if she did, or if she just hated me because my mom destroyed her. But I found out soon enough that she actually thought I still broke the sandbox by her children and her husband. Her children were so nice to me and told me that they were so sorry for their mother's behavior. Her husband told me nothing, but just by saying stop to the witch whenever she glared at me, I knew enough. My mom later told me that she came back a couple of times and stared at them, my parents. I don't know why. This witch really thought that I was still guilty, when almost everyone told her I wasn't. My mom also told me that it felt like she and my dad didn't have the freedom they wanted because they were constantly glared at by this goblin. Fun fact, I became friends with the people who actually destroyed part of the sandbox, and they told me that they did it because they wanted to rebel against her. If this is true because I was 10 and they were 12, 13, but I would like to think so. Story 3. This incident took place a few years ago. I've already graduated, but that's not really important to the story. The event happened during school hours in math class. I suffer from severe anxiety, coupled with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and being on the autism spectrum makes my anxiety attacks quite intense. As a result, I have to take specific medication to calm myself when these attacks begin. The symptoms are easy to identify. My heart feels like it's imploding, I struggle to breathe, I experience paranoia, and I shake uncontrollably. Eventually, I start crying and can't stop. It doesn't take much to set off an anxiety attack. Partly due to post-traumatic stress disorder I developed from past experiences. I've shared some of those stories elsewhere, but let's focus on this one. Some major triggers for me include yelling, objects being thrown, being chased, or, as in this case, someone angrily speed walking toward me. Because it's easy for me to be triggered, I carry a bottle of medication in my bag, labeled for use when necessary. However, I can only take it twice a day, within a certain time frame between doses. I had already taken the first dose before school to prepare myself for what I knew would be a stressful day. But during my math class, I felt that all too familiar tightness in my chest and tried to do some breathing exercises to calm down. There's something you should know about this teacher. He absolutely hated students interrupting the lesson for any reason. He would hand out detention slips like they were raffle tickets, even if you just asked to use the bathroom. Honestly, it was ridiculous, and despite numerous complaints, nothing ever changed. Another thing about him is that he has a naturally loud voice. It's not that he tried to be loud, but that booming voice, which usually didn't bother me, was one of the things that was setting me off that day. I would have been fine if he had just let me get some water. When I asked him if I could step out for a drink, he looked at me with a scowl. "Oh, and what makes you think you get to skip my lesson?" he asked in an accusatory tone. "What? No, sir. I just need water for my medication," I said, already nervous. But he was more annoyed that I wanted to leave the classroom to take my necessary medication than he was concerned about my health. He knew I took medication but didn't allow us to bring water bottles to class. I usually had to wait until after class to get a drink if I needed to take my medicine. "Your medication can wait. You're fine. Now sit down and be quiet," he snapped, sounding as though he was accusing me of faking it. Thankfully, my best friend was in the class. She doesn't have much of a filter, but she does have the amazing quality of not caring about others' opinions. Noticing that I was beginning to panic, she stood up and tossed her pencil toward the front of the room. "She needs her medicine, you clueless fool. If you think she's faking, you're as dense as a brick and should go live your life as one." This really angered him, and he started yelling at her. As much as I appreciate my friend, the yelling only made things worse. I dug through my bag, frantically trying to get the pill bottle out so I could take one dry, just to stop myself from having a full-blown anxiety attack in front of everyone. He didn't like that at all. He stormed over, grabbed the bottle before I could open it, and then walked back to his desk. My friend tried to get it back, but he locked it in his drawer. "There is no reason for you to be filling your head with lies about anxiety issues," he yelled. "You just want an excuse to get out of class." I started panicking even more and screamed, "It's not a lie. I need those. Give it back." "No, sit down. Both of you will have detention after school," he shouted. After that, the anxiety attack hit me full force. I don't usually remember much when I'm in the middle of an attack, but my friend told me later that I pushed my desk over, knocked the chair down, and collapsed to the floor, crying uncontrollably. When the teacher tried to get me to stand up, insisting that I was faking it, I scratched his arm in a panic. One of my classmates ran to get the principal. When they arrived, they made the teacher unlock his desk, despite his reluctance, and he was forced to give me my medication. My parents were called, and understandably, they were furious. They demanded action be taken and threatened a lawsuit. Knowing them, I'm sure they would have followed through if necessary. Afterward, they took me to the hospital to make sure I hadn't hurt myself during the attack. The teacher was suspended without pay and had to take classes on being more compassionate and medically aware. He was also forced to apologize, though it mostly seemed like he was sorry for himself rather than what he had done. I refused to attend his class again, and I was transferred to another one. While I wasn't allowed to keep my medication in my bag anymore, I was allowed to go to the nurse up to twice a day if I needed it. The teachers were made aware that if I needed my medicine, they had to let me go and then provide me with any resources I missed later. They couldn't make me wait or ask me to wait until after class. For the most part, the teachers were understanding, and though it was a rough end to the year, I managed to get through it. After that, my parents decided enough was enough and enrolled me in online schooling for the last 2 years, which was a much better experience for me. Nowadays, my anxiety is much more manageable, thanks to lots of therapy and psychiatric help. People really need to be more aware anxiety isn't a joke, and people can seriously get hurt during these attacks. Edit. I won't specify the location, but I've seen many comments about how medication should have been kept in the nurse's office. Where I went to school, they only did that with refrigerated medicine or extra doses. If you had a doctor's note for something like mine, which needed to be taken as soon as symptoms started, they allowed students to carry it with them. After this incident, though, they changed the policy, only allowing things like epinephrine pens to be carried. There was always a nurse on staff, so medication was accessible, and if they weren't there, someone in the office or a principal had the keys to access it. Story 4. I'm a 22-year-old guy who just graduated college with a degree in computer science. It wasn't easy, but I managed to land a job at a local tech startup. The pay isn't great, but hey, it's a foot in the door, right? My parents were so proud when I finished school that they surprised me with a car, a used Honda Civic, but it was in great shape and it was mine. I've always been careful with my stuff, so I promised myself I'd take good care of it. Last week, I was heading to pick up my little sister from her high school. She's 16 and just got her learner's permit, so she's always bugging me to let her practice driving. I figured I'd surprise her and let her drive us home if the traffic wasn't too bad. So there I was, waiting at this intersection near her school. The light turns green, and I start to go. Next thing I know, bam! This SUV comes out of nowhere and slams into my passenger side. My heart's racing, and I'm thinking, oh man, my parents are gonna freak. I get out of the car, still a bit shaken up. This woman, probably in her 30s, jumps out of her SUV and starts yelling at me. She angrily accused me of running a red light. I nervously explained that my light was green. She insisted that wasn't possible, claiming she had been texting and saw a green light when she put her phone down. I'm trying to wrap my head around what she just said. Did she seriously admit to texting while driving? Before I can respond, her kids start shouting from the SUV. The girl yelled that their mom was always right and called me a bad driver. The boy chimed in, telling me I should learn how to drive. The boy, who looks about 12 or 13, gets out of the car and marches up to me. He confidently stated that I was at fault and his mom did nothing wrong. He then demanded that I pay for the damages to their car. I'm standing there, completely stunned. These people are unbelievable. I tried to explain again that I had a green light and suggested we ask the witnesses around us. I also pointed out that she shouldn't be texting while driving, especially with kids in the car. The woman got defensive, telling me not to dare tell her how to parent and insisting her kids were fine. She then demanded my insurance information so she could report me. I agreed that we should exchange information and let the insurance companies handle it. As I reached for my wallet to get my insurance card, the woman and her son hurried back to their SUV. I called out to them, trying to stop them so we could exchange information, but it was too late. They sped off, tires screeching. That's when I noticed they don't even have license plates. Great. I call the police and a tow truck. Some people who saw the whole thing stick around to back up my story to the cops. I'm grateful for that, at least. While I'm waiting, all I can think about is how my parents are going to react. They spent a lot on this car, and even though it's not totaled, the repairs are going to be expensive. My job at the startup barely covers my living expenses, let alone car repairs. I'm also fuming about that woman. Who does she think she is? Texting while driving, trying to blame me, and then running off without exchanging information. And her kids. I can't believe how they acted. A few days later, I get a call from the police. Turns out, someone got a partial plate number of the SUV before it sped off. They managed to track down the woman. Apparently, she had a history of traffic violations and was driving on a suspended license. The SUV was actually her boyfriend's, and he had reported it stolen after she took off with it that day. The police inform me that they're pressing charges against her for the hit and run, driving on a suspended license, and child endangerment. Her boyfriend's insurance is going to cover the damage to my car. I feel a mix of relief and satisfaction. My car is getting fixed, and that woman is facing consequences for her actions. I just hope her kids learn something from all this, like not to text and drive, and that it's not okay to lie and run away from your mistakes. As for me, I'm definitely going to be extra careful at intersections from now on, and I think I'll wait a bit longer before letting my sister practice driving in my car. You never know what kind of crazy drivers are out there. Story 5. To start, this is about the company I work for and a trip I took because I had to wire a building for a computer network because the building owner wouldn't. Backstory. Our company was moving a remote site to a new building. As the IT guy for the company, I was asked to look at the new building and get network ports marked out. The landlord refused to put in any low-voltage lines, and we got quotes, but they were thousands of dollars. Enter me, my car, in 4 boxes of Cat 6 plenum. It's about an 8-hour drive, and I was doing about 30 drops. Not a ton, but still, a few days' work in some place that's already built up, and it's drop ceiling with insulation on top. Messy, itchy work. Story. Day 1. We get there Monday morning at the start of the month. It's actually a cool summer morning, and we're from further south, so no one notices the AC not working for about an hour. Slowly, the building begins heating up. It gets to 80 by noon, 85 at 3 p.m. The rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows are greenhouses. It's absolutely miserable. We've been told by the workers still on site that the leasing company was told there was no AC in our building 3 weeks ago. The other thing is there are still workers on site. The building isn't completed. So much for being ready for a handover day 1. Day 2. We're getting agitated. It's 80 degrees in the AM when we first walk in. It's sweltering. The other guy that came up with me is the facilities manager. He's screaming at people over the phone to fix the freaking AC. We're all exhausted from the heat by 3 p.m. I found a 4-foot hole in the ducting when I opened the ceiling tile. The AC was blowing, but there was no cold air. We are told the compressor is broken. Day 3. More of the same. Miserable in the morning. I'm finally getting the last lines punched in on the patch panel. The AC guys arrive about 10 a.m. They finally fixed the unit at 2 p.m. We asked them what they did. They said, a lot of things. We again said, what did you do? The reply was, we can't tell the tenants. Red flag alert. We contacted our realtor. She said she would look into what was done. She sends an email later that night that says, they changed the refrigerant from 22 reals to R410A. I told the facilities guy, no way dude. That's like putting gas in a diesel motor. They'd have to change out the entire system. They didn't do that in 4 hours. They basically duct taped and WD-40'd that thing back together, and it will run poorly for a month or so, then give out, and we'd be stuck with a replacement. Day 4. Still no running water to some areas, still workers on site. The AC can't keep up with the noonday sun, and it still hits around 80 by the end of the day. AC runs continuously. We're packing up all the stuff we moved in and moving out. I notice all the fire sprinklers look like they have moved, and the metal protection around the drop tile has fallen to the floor. The sprinklers are no longer protruding from the tiles in places. In others, they are quite a bit lower than they were. Yep, the AC fools stood on the fire sprinklers to fix their lousy duct work. We are looking for a friendly way out. We contact the landlord and say, you haven't delivered a finished building. We're moving out. The lease is broken. Landlord has a 36-page lease. Landlord won't let us out of the lease. It's 5 years. This is not starting off well. We get in contact with the corporate lawyer and the realtor. They both agree we're kind of screwed. We are desperate for any way out. I started looking at the fire system. I used to run all kinds of low-voltage lines, fire, security, etc. There is no fire panel in our portion of the building. No smoke detectors are hooked up to anything. More red flags. One of our employees that was moving the heavy gear says, oh yeah, I meant to mention, I never saw any building permits anywhere, ding ding ding. They did this build-out, including demolition, running new plumbing and power lines, and destroying the fire system without a city permit. Cue the call to the city inspector's office. Day 5. I wasn't here for this part, but the facilities manager told me this. The city inspector pulled the permits for the building. There weren't any. He finds multiple violations of city code. Red tagged our area, removed the certificate of occupancy. When I told him to check the fire system like you said, he just goes, oh no, I have to make a call. He calls the fire marshal. Day 8. Fire marshals arrive on scene. Find no active alarm system in our portion of the building. Red tag. Find the sprinkler riser for the entire building in our area. No water pressure. Condemned the entire building. Basically, they wouldn't let us out of the building because we signed a lease, even though they never delivered a building in any semblance of working order. Called the building inspector, got them smoked, who then called the fire marshal, who condemned the entire building. They are still trying to fight us over it, but we're pushing for them not only refunding our deposit and the rent, which they have already done, but for all the time spent moving gear in and out, and all the wiring. Our lawyer says they don't have a leg to stand on, and he's happy for them to pay his fees as well. Story 6. Well, I guess this is the place to talk about this because people here seem to have grown up in healthy families. Whenever I tell that to my friends, some of them will say, that's what moms do. And one of them even tells me I'm a coward because he didn't even have a mom growing up. His passed away when he was born, and I should put up with it. Now, some full backstory. I'm the younger child of my moms who had 4 children. I have an older sister and twin middle sisters. Growing up, I used to be the complicated child. My sister would always get compliments about their grades and behavior at school, whereas I was always struggling with school. Well, my mom thought I was some kind of genius because I learned how to speak and read really fast, speaking at 15 months old and reading at 3, so she consulted with a lot of schools, and eventually one of them accepted me at the age of 5, skipping 2 years of preschool. At the beginning, it was okay, because a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old are not so different in their interests. But when I got to higher levels, it started to get troubling. The content of classes was not of my interest. So this is what went wrong with school. Besides, at age 11, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I had to take medicine to help me go through school properly. The medicine I took was really strong, and it had me emotional most of the day. I was bullied for crying over small things, and having no appetite was an issue, because I hate my body. I hated being a skinny kid. I wanted to be chubby, because I always saw chubby people as more attractive. That's my thing. It got worse. I entered high school at the age of 13, whereas all the other teenagers were 15 or so. So, while I was worried about the next Power Rangers season and rewatching all the seasons of Digimon, they were all thinking about girlfriends, their first alcohol shots, and even drugs. Needless to say, I had no friends at all at high school and a lot of bullies. I joined college at age 16. My mother was really proud because my sisters didn't do it in the first attempt. All of them had to join private universities because they couldn't get to a public one. But that's the problem here. I was 16, had no childhood because I had no friends at all growing up, and there was I in a room full of people who were over 20 years old. My whole class hates me because I was too immature to be there. Well, this was also the year my mom found out I'm gay. She gave me a call, telling me she had the biggest disappointment of her life. I was a curse, and that I should have died when I was 2. I choked on a plastic flower for 2 hours or so, before someone could remove it so I could breathe. My relationship with her never got back from that. Ever since, she refused for paying for my medicine, even though I was unemployed, and well, I see a lot of stories here about people who started working really soon. But I live in Brazil, and the law here is that teenagers under 18 can't work, and if they do, the employer might get in trouble. So, I had no money, and my ADHD kicked in from there. I managed to get through the first 3 years of college very well. I didn't fail any disciplines except for one which I failed because attendance. My mom took me to her house in another city at the beginning of the semester and refused to send me back sooner alone, which caused me to lose 3 weeks of class, which was worth 24 absences, when the failing cap was 21. But from the 4th year on, I had problems with my attention to the subjects. I study veterinary medicine, and from the 4th year on the subjects start getting very specific. For example, we had faux study medical clinic for equestrians and bovines. I hate studying horses and bulls, so it was difficult. I have been failing at least one subject for the past 6 years. Next year I'll be there for 11 full years without graduating. Thanks untreated ADHD, you rock. I have seen all of my friends graduate, yet here I am still a year away from my graduation if I pass all the subjects. My failures didn't bother me at all in the beginning. I was young and started way too soon. It was okay if I had to wait a few more years to graduate. My best friend also finished, and she helps me a lot with doubts from difficult subjects. The problem is, my mom hates when I fail, and every time she heard I failed, she would go on a rant for hours, calling me useless, lazy, and retarded. She loves telling me how incompetent I am, that if I listened to her advice, I would be a God's man and a successful person. It's one of her favorite. She also likes to call me stupid and tell me that me being gay is the problem, because I don't hide my sexuality. She proceeds to yell about how she sacrificed her youth to raise 4 children alone, she divorced my father when I was 3, and how she's tired of working to keep my luxury. Now here, keep in mind that mom earns $7,000 a month and spends like $200 with me when I need something like new clothes or food that she offers herself to buy for me. I do have a small job now and pay for most of my stuff, and we share the bills. I pay internet and water. She pays light. We don't have gas bills in Brazil. She's constantly reforming our house, changing things. She recently bought a new car, even though we already have two, and spends around $500 with her hair every 2 weeks. Yet she insists I spend all of her money. Besides, she didn't live with me until this year's May. That's when she got a job in my city and came to live with me. It didn't go well. The humiliating speeches have been on since 2013, when I joined college, and it continues to this day. So, after the pandemic, I haven't been feeling well. I was worried that I was getting depressed and wanted to see a psychologist or psychiatrist. But my mom just said I should pray to God to set free of it, and refused to believe me that it was that serious. So, in the last month, my life got a terrible turn. My boyfriend broke up with me. My anxiety was kicking in to the point my blood pressure would blast off at the minimum sign of stress. College was not going well, and my mom being here, constantly humiliating and degrading me, was not helping. So at the end of semester I fail another subject. I know my mom's here and she won't let it pass. I can't help but have a panic attack and start crying. I cry so hard I start coughing, and I cough so hard I vomit. The desperation gets to the point when I think, I'd rather take my life than spend another year in failure and humiliation. So I take a full bottle of pills and lay down, waiting for it to be over. It doesn't work, and my sisters are worried about me. The panic attack is over and I start thinking better about it, and it hits me that I didn't have a reason to do that. Besides, I was not ready to keep hearing my mother's humiliation over and over again. I decide I will not let her speak to me or my sisters like that ever again. You might think that was the story, right? Well, it wasn't. The important part of the story is what happened last week. My mom decided to take my medical history to the university and ask for the support of my teachers, now that she sees that college almost had me done with my life. They say it's all set, but they need to meet with me before they proceed. I attend to a meeting with my courses coordinator and with a psychologist from CSI Center of Support to Inclusion. As soon as I enter the psychologist officer, she doesn't mind me. I tell her, "Hi, I'm Op. I'm studying vet school and I have a DHD. She doesn't seem impressed by this part, and then I say the magic words, "I'm my mom's son." As soon as she hears my mother's name, something snaps inside of her. She immediately tells me to sit down and tells her assistant to leave the room because she needs to talk to me in private. So, Op, let me ask you, did you refuse to accept you have a DHD? What took you so long to bring your medical history? I'm shocked, and I reply, I thought my mom had it brought before because I was a minor when I joined. Well, your mom came in here with a very weird story, saying you tried to Kai's because of what a teacher said. She also mentioned the bad influence of a friend, a boyfriend, and the problems you had with your father. Oh, well, I never told my mom those were the reasons for my attempt to KMS. The teacher talked to me 2 days after the attempt. He had nothing to do with it. And he only told me that there was no possible way I could recover my lost grades, so it was failing or failing. She also blames my best friend because when I met her, she didn't find the way my mom treated me up until my 20s. She treated me like a child, like I had no permission to sleep over or to go anywhere with my friends without her knowing. My friend told me I should cut the umbilical cord, and she was right. When my mom stopped treating me like that, I felt way better. My ex-boyfriend was not a problem at all. We broke up on good terms, although I still miss him to this day, but it was not reason enough for me to try to KMS. I haven't spoken to my father for 4 years now. We had a complicated relationship because my father left me really soon in my life, as I said, the age of 3, and he never tried to be close to me or my sisters. He used to pay for child support, but then in the middle of the pandemic, with me having serious economic problems, he sued me to stop paying for child support even though I was still in college in Brazil. The law is that you pay it until your kid graduates or turns 24. I was 23 during pandemic. I would be okay with that because I did have a job and I could spare a little, but he had just engaged with a woman who had a 3-year-old son, and when I visited them, I saw the kid with a tablet, a video game, his own cell phone with internet, a ton of automatic toys and etc. To help you with the math, my child support was $500. The tablet his stepson was holding is around $1,900. So, well, he couldn't afford to pay $500 support to me, but he could buy a tablet which was 4 times this value to the other boy. I don't hate the boy, just my father. I actually helped taking care of him and played with him a lot when I visited, because I really like children. I might be jealous because my father is giving him what he never gave me, but I have no hard feelings against him. It's not his fault that my father prefers to give support to another man's child instead of his own. This also includes my sisters who never had anything but child support from him. That was the last I heard from my father, and it bothered me to the point I changed my name. I was a junior. I'm not anymore. Well, those are all different things in which I didn't think a bit while attempting against my life. The psychologist hears it all, and she is gagged. When she asks about my relationship with my mother, I say it's complicated, and as she keeps asking deeper questions, I tell her everything I told you above. The psychologist asks me if I have already told her about my feelings when I tried to KMS. I say that not yet, and she's worried. She says my mom also needs therapy because she can't take the blame for her actions. All the pressure and humiliation she has put me through needs to be worked on. I left the office impressed with what my mom can make up to get rid of her guilt, but I'm not surprised. My mom never really apologized for her mistakes with anyone, neither me, nor my sister, nor anyone in our family. She always blames it on someone or something else, and says she wouldn't have done it if another person had done something different. P.S. Well, yesterday, I did tell my mom that she was the reason I attempted to KMS, not in a gentle way. She had a tooth surgery, and my sister spent the whole week taking care of her. Yesterday, my sister wanted to see a friend, and she freaked out about it, calling my sister a party-goer and irresponsible. I replied that she deserved it, but my mom said I shouldn't say anything since much like her I am, guess what? Useless and unwanted. So I proceeded to tell, go ahead, say that. Next week you can lie to the psychologist about it to get rid of your guilt of when I tried Sui. I didn't try to do it because of anyone but you. Yet hear you repeating the same things you did for all those years until it almost murdered me. She started crying and isolated herself for the whole day. She didn't speak to me until now. She went on a trip to her birthplace with my sister, and they will be back only next week. I don't know how things are going to be when they come back.